Hello, it's a Sunday, and that must mean that I am here with an art journal page. I am getting back into the groove of doing these art journal pages. If you've been following me long, then you'll know, but if you're new here, maybe because of my iCads or something else, I teach an art journaling class here locally in Vegas to a really great group of gals. And we have anywhere between 6 and 26 different gals who come on over, and I used to teach at a local store, and then that store closed down, so we now have set up a little classroom space in our new house, and it's very exciting. And so we took a break while that store was closing, and then I was figuring out where I was going to teach classes and what was going to happen. So there's a bit of a break in there, about a 6-month period, where I wasn't putting very many art journaling videos up, but we are back. So we're going to have at least 2 art journaling videos a month, doing those daily iCads, and lots going on my YouTube channel. So I am starting here with a piece of 9-inch by 12-inch Canson watercolor paper, and I took some Liquitex gesso and I very specifically painted in the middle of the paper, but I did not go all the way to the edge, because then I put a little puddle of gesso and I got out my palette knife and I scraped the gesso along the edges where I had not previously put any gesso. And the whole point is to sort of create a variation between a gessoed surface and then a blank page, like a raw watercolor paper that's going to now soak up this Stabilo. So I have really been experimenting, especially with my iCads and different things, collages and all kinds of things, materials wise, about how the Stabilo reacts and like what kinds of paper it soaks into, how easy it is to kind of move around on gesso and things like that. Because a Stabilo is a Marxall, and this specific Stabilo is. And the idea is that you can mark on things like ceramics, glass, plastic, metal, and then you can wipe it off when you're done. So I would attribute that to like product design and architecture and carpentry and things like that, where you might need a mark, but a temporary mark. And so, of course, this Stabilo has become very popular in the mixed media and arts industry, and that's where you pick it up even, is right at, like I pick mine up at Black Art Materials. And so I've been experimenting with it in my paper, in my art in general, whether it's paper-based or collage-based or paint-based or whatever. So I really wanted to introduce that into art journaling with my art journaling girls, my local group, because I want to share with them everything I know. And my experimentation is really to broaden my artistic ability and then to share that with other people. So I did that gessoing in a very specific manner, leaving some raw watercolor paper around the edges. And then I heated that dry, and now I'm doing a couple different layers of Stabilo. The Stabilo is always water reactive. However, if it's a very porous surface, then that surface will be stained with the Stabilo. And anytime you add water to paper, the paper expands. And if you overwork it, then the paper starts to pill. So I'm keeping that in mind also while I'm doing these layers. I'm letting them dry fairly well before I add another layer of water on top of it, because I don't want this watercolor paper to pill. Watercolor paper is a lot more heavy duty than, say, a cardstock, and especially like a copy paper or something like that. However, any paper can be overworked. So I'm adding some Stabilo and drying, adding some Stabilo and drying. And then here you can see where the Stabilo is the darkest. It's one of two things. It's either that raw watercolor paper I talked about that is untreated, or it's where the Stabilo pooled. So it's kind of cool, and it's fun, and it's exciting, and it's unique, and it's just a way to experiment. You can see them working next to each other, and the Stabilo really like highlighted that cool texture that we got, that I achieved around the edge. Then I thought that it was already looking kind of doomy and gloomy, and why don't I add in some flowers here? And I wasn't exactly going for something super specific, but I thought it would be cool if I just kind of experimented the rest of the way with water-soluble products today. So I'm still using Stabilo, and I've taken it and I've scribbled it in the bottom of my plastic cup and then added some water to it. And now I'm using it to create the petals, or what would kind of mimic petals on this flower. And the stem and the little shoot offs are all Stabilo, and I have not picked up any other material yet. And I'm kind of just deciding on composition and how many I want and where I want them. And that one gets a little dark, so then I think, well, kind of see what happens here and keep going with it. And while I was working on it, I lost a little bit of faith in the fact that I was staying in the grays and the blacks. And so I do add some color. Now that I'm rewatching, I'm actually, like, part of my brain is kind of like, oh, it does look kind of good in black and white, but it's all right. It's no biggie. I wanted to, art journaling is definitely all about experimenting and not necessarily the finished product, though fairly often the finished product might be pretty or might be interesting or unique or devastating or sorrowful or whatever your art journal page ends up being. In the beginning, I hope that it is a place for you to learn and to experiment. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm experimenting with water-soluble products. So still working on that Stabilo and working that in and kind of deciding composition-wise how I want those flowers to interact and how many I want on the page. And I'm not sure what else I'm going to put on the page, but it's starting to sort of look like maybe I'm looking through a rainy window, you know, or there's a lot of droplets on the window and I'm just sort of like looking out. And it's a little bit, like I said before, it's a little bit doom and gloom. It's water droplets and it's kind of hazy and it's really interesting. I did purposely take a stem off the side as well as put a bundle of flowers, or the head of the flower, towards the bottom of the page. To add a lot of interest to your page, you can make things go off the edges, and then that makes the reader or the looker or the seer, the voyeur, whoever's looking at your page, it makes them realize that the story continues, that the story of your page, your feelings, your intention does not end at the border, that it goes on. You have other, however you want to put it, there are other life experiences, or it's much broader. Whatever you're trying to convey is much broader than the four walls of this page can contain. I have now come in with a feud ball pen, and I just picked up a big section of these, a big chunk of them. I don't know, a large quantity, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't know why I said it like that. A large quantity of these to have in our art journaling classroom because they are awesome and they write on almost anything. These are, what did I say it was? I think I said feud ball, but it is a Pilot G2 pen. I think that's right. I don't have one in front of me, but I will for sure put it in the supply list so you know exactly what I'm using. And this is the 10, the 1.0 millimeter, and it's really cool. It's kind of chunky, and it's adding some great value and contrast to my page because I had a lot of white space, and then I had this medium gray tone in there, and now I'm adding in some darks and some shadows. I mentioned earlier that today I'm playing with water-soluble products, and that is still true. This pen is also water-soluble, so it's not great for permanency, but if you, for example, wanted to write all over your background, and then you want to paint over it and you didn't want it to be legible, you could use this pen, and then as you painted, the words would get all teary and drippy and cool. As well as you could shade with it, or, you know, I mean, there's any number of things you could do with it. But if you wanted it to be legible or you wanted it to not smear, then it would just be the final thing that you do on your page. I am circling some of the dots that I made earlier with the Stabilo. I am adding in some smaller dots. I am putting dots in the middle of some of the Stabilo dots. I'm mostly just working now on adding more texture because I was feeling like it was a little bit one-dimensional. It didn't have enough variety to it. But just by using this pen and adding different sized dots and some little scribbles and kind of circling some of the other dots, I'm adding in a lot more variety in texture, in shape, in size, not yet in tone, though I do have the three major ones. I have the black as my dark tone, the white as my light tone, and then a gray as my medium tone. And you see here, this is like really quick stippling. It's not even something that I think about. I just dot, 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 dot all over the page. And I did do some handwriting, so I did a little bit of writing in there and kind of put my intentions forth on the page. And yeah, so some pen work. So we started with Stabilo, and then we went to some pen work. Now I'm going to get out some more water soluble products. For this video specifically, I'm using Lyra watercolor crayons. When I do the class, I'll have a much broader variety. I'll have Lyra watercolor crayons. I'll have woody, Stabilo woodies. I will have Dina Wakley scribble sticks, and I will have Neocolor 2s. All four of which are still water soluble even after you've added water to them. So the only way to make them permanent is by like using a gesso with them or a spray fixative. There are water soluble products that turn permanent after you've wet them the initial time. Such products would be gelatos, and those are by Faber-Castell, and Inktense blocks by Derwent, and there's one other one in my head. I can't think of it right now. I'm sorry. Anyways, they are out there. I am not using them on this project because I just very specifically wanted to play with the fluidity that water-soluble products have, and especially the ones that remain water-soluble. So I'm starting to get layers here, and basically what that lends to is my Stabilo layer underneath was affected when I put my green Lyra watercolor crayon down and added water to it. Then the Stabilo layer started to move along with my Lyra watercolor layer, as well as the pen layer, because those were not a permanent pen. So in the close-up shots that are at the beginning and the end of the video, you can see I start to get this very fluid sort of liquidy feel about my page, which makes me think more of that like rainy window. Like I'm sort of looking out into, I don't know, a garden, or these flowers are popping up on the other side of the window pane, or just anything like that. But it's very fluid, and it has a lot of movement to it, and also a lot of value, because when I add the water to the Lyra watercolor crayons and the Stabilo and the pen, then they tend to get a bit more vibrant. And as I pull my brush away, then they pull some of that color, but they're also pulling water, so the colors start to thin out. So I have a very intense, vibrant section of color that blends out into this sort of hazy effect. So check it out in the close-up shots, because it is very cool, and it's a totally unique type of feel to it, and the only way to get it is by water-soluble products. And the ones that remain water-soluble, because those others that turn permanent after they've initially been touched with water, then they're permanent and they're not going to react together like all of our layers are here. So it's very cool, very cool. I love it. I'm pretty much done with the colors now. I did get out this white Sharpie pen. I've been using it and everything. I did get it out to test it out, and then I didn't like it, so I just put it away. It's easy. Test it out a little bit, don't like it, clean it off, put it back. Then as I was sitting there, like even a while longer, I thought, oh, what if I put some masking tape up here? Because masking tape reacts very, very uniquely to water-based products as well. Because it's so plasticky and it has that cover to it, then water-soluble products tend to pool up on it, and I love masking tape anyways. So I just added a big section of masking tape at the top, and I added some Stabilo to it, and I kind of let it run around on top of the masking tape, and I took it a little bit off the page, and that's it. So just playing around with some water-soluble stuff today. Thanks so much for joining me. I always appreciate it when you're here. Leave me some comments below. Let me know if you have any questions. I always try to answer those. And feel free to subscribe. I'd love to have you along my journey. And thank you again.